I need audio. Hello, everybody. How is it going? Welcome to Rocket Lasso, Season 4, Episode 1. Welcome, welcome. Thanks, everybody, for coming in. I had the audio muted. Sorry about that. So, how is everybody? We got people popping in already. So, we're going to be setting up. I'm going to be announcing different bits of news. In the meantime, start getting questions together. If you have, I guess we'll go over the basic rules for people who might be new or haven't seen it in a while. I'm going to be answering questions live from the chat. So we've got Twitch going in chat and we got YouTube going. I tend to try and alternate between them. You can do typed out questions. I like those. If you want to do a link, you're going to have to do it in Twitch. YouTube does not allow links. Once you put the link in on Twitch, or if you're going to do a link, it needs to be something I can see who made it. I need to see the artist or the studio. I need to be able to give credit. If I can't give credit, then it has to be more of an abstracted thing where you just do like a Google image search of like, oh, this type of thing. But I do like typed out questions, so don't worry about that. Those are also fun. I like working from real life reference as well, instead of just seeing other people's like motion graphics pieces. Because typically what we get is a lot of links to Instagram and whatnot of like, oh, here's this cool animation. But it's sometimes even more fun working from real life. Okay, so having said all that, we've got people popping in. We've got some old names. We got some new names. We got an almost equal number of people popping in on Twitch and YouTube, which is nice to see. We'll give it a little more time for people to come in. How is the audio level? I did a bunch of work on the microphone. It should be set up better than ever. And the camera seems to be working, and all the live stream stuff seemed to work really well. I didn't have to change anything. All the streaming keys and everything seemed to work pretty well. Anyway, get those links together, get those questions together. We don't have a show if we don't have questions. So I will, well, let's see, cover some general news. First of all, season 4, we're back. Then another thing to mention is the season's a little bit later than usual. Usually it would have been about a month ago for the beginning, but we get sort of distracted because Rocket Lasso contracted directly with Maxon for a couple of months. And what we were doing is we were doing consulting for them on the nodes, where we were kind of like paid testers in a way for like really going deep and doing it, but all the while in the context of developing some tools through Neutron, through the nodes as capsules. So I'll be pulling those up and doing really quick demos of them. I've already talked about them in more extended videos. So you'll want to check out those videos for all the details, but I think they're pretty neat. If you have R25, you're going to have those tools already on your computer for free. So they're pretty cool. And they're almost like full on, especially the graph one is almost a full on like Rocket Lasso level plugin. So that's exciting. Right before the season that ended, season 3 ended, in the middle of the season, we launched the gems. Let me see if I can pull those up. I did launch the gemstone collection, which, scroll. Yep, there they are. So I'll just pull this up on the screen and click the share button. So yeah, we launched, and then as soon as I moved to the other screen, it showed the wrong thing. Why did I refresh? There we go. Better. So yeah, we launched this gemstone collection, and I guess scrolling different sizes is moving it up and down. So yeah, I created a bunch of different models. There's 10 different gemstones and a bunch of different materials that come along with it. It's pretty exciting. And if you are supporting on Patreon, you get a 100% off coupon. Otherwise, I think it's like $20. So that's a cool thing that launched during the break. We also have been hard at work on the utilities. That definitely got a little bit on the back burner as we worked on some of this Maxon stuff, but they're essentially ready to launch, and that's only because I had to just do that presentation for Maxon last week, and now the live stream is back, and in the middle of April is going to be NAB, and I'm going to be presenting for Maxon in person, so I have to prepare that presentation as well. So it's going to be a busy month, but Utility Spines just needs me to record all the videos for it, which can take some time. But anyway, those are ready to go. Got to get those shipped, so looking forward to that as well. And then what else do we have news-wise? We're getting close to having, well, it's a little ways away. We're getting ready to announce the date for Half Res. It's going to be a little ways away yet, but the event won't be happening until sometime in September, probably. What else is there to announce right now? Nothing immediately jumps to mind. So I'm going to open up Cinema 25, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those 2 new tools. So we will switch over there. Here I am in the corner. So if you have Cinema 4D R25, and it only works in R25 because we have to use a bunch of nodes that are only available in R25, so it was literally the only option. But if you already have R25, then if you go into your asset browser, you should be able to search for, you've got nothing here, and I can search for the word FUI. And there are going to be two new spline types here. One is called FUI graph, and the other one is the FUI grid, or FUI graph, FUI grid. And there's a bunch of demo files that go along with it, a bunch of test files that I created using Redshift to render them out and make them look all pretty. So really quickly, I'll touch upon some graph stuff here. Now, important things to note. This is it's essentially a node setup, but because of the way we built it, it's allowed to be dragged into the object manager as a spline. So it's going to behave exactly like a cinema spline for all purposes, even to the extent I think you could probably put inside your spline menu and it would live really well inside of there. Now, the grid is pretty straightforward. It's the first one that we did. It was kind of like a prototype test, but it was definitely something I found myself wanting to reach for decently often. So the idea is it's a super basic grid. We have just a spline grid to create lines. Really straightforward to change the number of cells. So we can put a bunch more there. It's a type of thing that could be fed into a sweep. And that is then fed, let's say, an end side. T for scale them down. You can see we get a bunch of lines going back and forth, just covering it. But of course, in Redshift, you can render these directly. I guess I'll just show you that really quick. I'm sure a lot of people know, but by adding a Redshift object tag and turning the visibility on, we could say hair strands or something like capsules is my second favorite. And even right now, that will render. I can open up Redshift, hit go, and give it a second to initialize. And there, you see it will render and show up in spite of just being a spline. Things get a lot more exciting when you apply a material and then you add a glow and you make the entire thing explode outward. I'm not going to spend any time on that right now. I have that in other demos, but keep that in mind. Now, where the grid gets a little more interesting is that it is actually a three-dimensional grid. So, well, I guess I'll show you the basic mode here. Right now, it's based on the entire line going all the way across. If I go to segment mode, what's actually happened is every one of these individual ones has exploded out. So now you'll see if I add some gap in there that we can separate those out, and every one of those is a separate little segment. And then there's box mode, reset the gap, go to box mode. And what box mode does is each one of these is now a rectangle. So now I can shrink that and they're individual rectangles. Combined with that, we have the full inside and outside mode. So switching over to just the outside, you see I get an outline of that. If I click inside, it'll only be the ones on the interior. Switching that to line mode, you can see how we will now lack that outer one or just have the outer one, especially adding in segment mode and doing a gap. You can see we get this nice dotted line. And the last thing that makes this very useful is that it's actually three-dimensional. I'll change this to per step and make this smaller. So I'll say 22 by 22 by 22. And now I can add on additional grid elements to give it some height. So now those will be pushing upward. I can make as many of those as I want, and we get a three-dimensional grid. Now, if you set that up properly and set it up to render nicely, then you can actually make some really nice setups here for actually seeing all the depth. Even making some basic geometry here is going to go a long way. Let me just create a nice clean end side again and put the radius way down. And what do I got here? Segment to full. What is stopping that from showing up right now? Line mode? Oh, there's just a lot of them because I was in segment mode, so I was trying to generate a lot of sweeps. But anyway, now we get this bit of geometry here, and you can get some really cool, like, patterned setups really quickly. That's one of the main deals with this, is that you can do all this really quickly. And then I can change this to be showing only the outside, and now you see it becomes like this cage where it's only the exterior. That can be set to box mode. We can give that more offset in the gap. I guess the rectangle is not going to sweep that too well, so I will just pull that out for a moment. And yeah, we get these outer rectangles. We can jump back into that and say line mode and do the inside. So now you can see we only get those interiors. So basic grid stuff, but it opens up a lot of opportunities with this as a raw tool to layer up and do additional things. I guess one last thing that I tend to like doing for an FUI type setup would be if I drop that down and let's make that be one grid, but I'll make a second one and say that the size will be half the amount and then double the count. So now one of these is double the detail of the previous one, and we'll be able to see that a little bit if I change the material color to custom, set it to some color, and let me just scoot that down a hair so we can see the two separated. So now you can see that we get one grid and another one. You could layer them up so it's like 10 by 10 by 10, and then even smaller and smaller and smaller. So they layer up really nicely. By the way, I'm going to show the graph one really quick because there we go. That's grid in R25. You already got that. Everybody start getting your questions together. Write it in the chat, and I will be going through and chatting with everybody as we go. But quickly covering the other one, again, in your asset browser, in R25, we also made FUI graph. And I really like this one. I kind of went nuts on it. I went overboard for the implementation of everything it does. But here is a graph spline. And the basic idea here is you can generate a bunch of different types of data, and then you can display those bits of data in different forms, in different types of graph. So to begin with, we'll go into the different graph types. You can see that we are in the type of a bar graph. So that's what we're seeing, a bar graph. We can change the count to be higher or lower. And then we can change it to a line graph. And now it's just seeing the data, but making the line at top. I can put that to a step graph. And if I shrink that down, you can see it almost starts looking like a series of buildings all stacked up. Exact same data. If I click onto the bar graph, you'll see it's the same info, but now instead of making a series of rectangles, it's making a single interconnected line. I can click close, and that's actually going to seal that off. So that's something that could then be extruded. And then the last mode is pie graph, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So putting this back to the default, a bunch of basic settings. You can set the height, set the width. Something that's kind of nice is we can set some rounding on here. So I can round those out. It makes a very different looking type of graph. And then we could say, hey, instead of representing this as a series of rectangles, I'd like to put it into line mode. And now you see a single line there. Good for, well, lots of reasons to want that, but it's also nice for cloning onto. And yeah, we'll leave it at that for now. And then let's move into data, and data is exciting. By default, it's set up with some animation already. If I hit play, you're going to see that it's already animating the data. So now that we're in the data tab, you can see there's 4 different types of data. We have manual data, and if I click on that, then we can manually put in bits of data by appending or truncating, and I can grab any one of these and say, actually, that's taller, and this one isn't as wide. So I can manually put them. I know a common request is to be able to import CSVs. In the early version of this, I was trying to make it do it. R25 didn't quite do it as well as I wanted it to, so it's possible in a version 2.0 that will be there. Jumping in, we've got random. Random's a lot like noise, except it's making completely random numbers. But a couple nice things. We have our minimum, so we can set that. We have our maximum to pull it down. We can shift all the parameters up or down. You see they still get clamped, so that's pretty nice. And then bias, which is kind of a contrast. I can increase that and even push it beyond 100%. And then something we haven't seen here is we can also set width variation. So by dragging variation up, you can see that some of them are going to shrink down and become thinner, and others are going to become larger. And you can push that really far and get like huge ones and some tiny ones. So yeah, that width variation is very fun as well. And then there is spline mode. Jumping a spline, whatever you draw the spline as will represent the data. And then there's even this offset, which is going to sample this and loop around. So I can grab this offset and start, actually, I guess it only refreshes once I let go. So if I start clicking, you see it's going to start looping around, but there's an automatic animation one. Set that to 55%. Hit play, and now those will be moving around quite nicely. Turn that off. Let's go back to noise, which is the most fun one. You can set the noise type, so it's got all the different noise types. You can something like Luca, which is huge, or Luca, which is a really noisy one. So I can increase the noise scale. You see how we're zooming in on noise or moving away from the noise. And that can be animated. So right now there is a speed of 25, but when it comes to that noise moving, there's actually a loop frame. So I could say, I would not want that to loop on frame 91. So now you see as I hit frame 90, it's perfectly looping around. There's also the horizontal noise. So I could go and give these some spacing. And you see how, you know, we've got random width, but if I give that a bit of animation speed as well, we can see those start moving left and right. Let's go really slow on that one, because a little change on width variation goes a long way. So yeah, see these moving and wiggling around. So the ability to generate crazy random data and layer these things up is pretty cool. Going back to graph, something else that's neat here is we got shift, and I can pull that down. We can go to the halfway point, and you can see that's going to, like, the data is going to split in the middle. Going back into data, we could increase the contrast through bias and now make it smaller and larger as it goes. We could shift the entire thing down, so most of the data is going to kind of zero out. We only get these tiny little ones poking through. Back to graph, I could put the shift fully to negative, and now you see it pushes downward instead of up. So there's a lot of power here, a lot of crazy combinations. And pretty cool that this is free to all R25 users. So while we've got this, I'll go to graph mode, drop the count way down, and let's jump into the final mode, which is the final graph type, which is pi. And you can see that that's now going to be displaying the same information, but now as a proportion of a circle, as a proportion of a pie chart. So it's all animated, so it's going to look more like a FUI type element. But the ability to start layering these things up can get pretty crazy, like pushing these out. You see that radius, we can feed this an inner radius to allow those to get pushed out. I could do it from the inside, so now they're pivoting from the outermost radius and pushing in. And then we have things like modified data, where I can shuffle the data and rearrange all of those around. We can make these more uniform. We could make way more, or like very few. And yeah, lots of cool, crazy combinations, especially once you start making more than one. It gets a little bit slow, but putting this into a cloner and blending between two can get really powerful. Let me see if I can go find the animation that I made to go along with this. Just take a moment. Maxon nodes. Example files, FUI, graph, demos, renders. Okay, so yeah, here's the last one I made. So almost everything except for the outline and the pane of glass here, all you're seeing here is graph. Like it's graph put into a loft, graph just being set up to render through Redshift. So all these different types of lines layered up, combined, putting these different toppers on the different sections, making these circles, like so many cool different combinations. So yeah, and I think even this is set up to loop, so that should be a perfect loop going around as well. So I know people like things being able to loop, really fun. Here's another one. This was probably a lower resolution. Oh, why doesn't, oh, that one. Yeah, just another kind of earlier test, but like being able to layer all these up. Yeah, really fun. It's super fun to put together, super fun to like really push how many different parameters I could put in and still have it be controllable, and kind of show off a little bit of the power that Neutron has, that the scene nodes have right now, because obviously it's still a work in progress. We gave them lots of notes. It's really cool because Maxon was really excited to get our feedback, and I know for a fact that they're starting to implement some of our ideas for future versions. So that should make them hopefully more user-friendly and easier to get into, the best of our ability to add to it. I mean, it's still inherently, nodes are always going to be more complex than even Espresso. Espresso did very limited things, but here you can build new objects from scratch. So it's always going to be more complicated, but the opportunities are there, and we're having fun pushing the limits. I'm going to start taking a look at the chat. I guess I'll answer any questions in regard to these in particular, and then we'll start tackling proper questions, jumping into people in the chat's questions. So let's see. Sky was asking if the graph could be used within like the confines of a sphere. Not easily, and there are some weird limitations, obviously, when it comes to capsules. I'll show you what I would do. Essentially, right now, I can't implement MoGraph tools directly into the graph. Oops, I did not mean to do that. Back to startup layout. You can't implement MoGraph tools, things like effectors and fall-offs. You cannot implement them directly in. That part just doesn't exist yet inside of assets. Now, having said that, let's not make this too crazy, but I'm going to set that to segment, and let's go 10 by 10 by 10. So with segment, you know that this is now separating every single one of these. So now that every single one of those is being separated, I think, let's find out if this will work. I will put that into a fracture, and now in the fracture, tell it to explode the segment. So all of those should have kind of exploded onto their own object, which does mean you could do things, well, actually, let me show you. I should be able to do something like add a random effector, and you see that they've all kind of exploded and moved away from each other. So you can do that type of thing. Instead of random, let us apply a plane effector. Instead of pushing up, I will scale in a uniform absolute way to -1 scale. So now everything should be scaling down to 0. Now we see these tiny little dots. I don't know if they actually have any dimension or if they're fully flat. So keep in mind, I'm not sure if those will render or not. Actually, we might be able to turn on visibility. Yeah, I'm not sure. Those don't seem to be disappearing, but we'll find out. Anyway, now I'm shrinking everything to 0, but if I go into the field, I could say, hey, limit to a spherical field, and now they are shrinking inside of that. If I were to increase that shape, you can see that now indeed we are seeing a circle. If I control the fall off under the fields, under the spherical field, under remapping, scroll down, here's that inner offset. So you can see I can give it a fall off and scale it up. And then it's a bit big right now, so T for scale, scale it down. And then the last bit would be we have to invert this. So under remapping, I'll click invert. And actually, oh, I think because I turned visibility on, they can only be visible there. So turn that off. There we go. So now you can see that I do get that shape inside. Now it's using a spherical field. You don't have to get that specific. I think in the field we could probably just drag another shape. So it takes longer to calculate. Keep that in mind. But if I make a sphere and I drag the sphere inside, let's hide the sphere and say, okay, plane effector, you're seeing the sphere and you're going to see it as a volume. And I think that it's erased out the center. So I'm going to go into remapping and say invert. And there, now see only the things that are inside of that sphere. I'm going to scale up the sphere. So now it's physical geometry, and now it's making them pop in or out to be seen that way. So yeah, totally able to combine that with like a fracture object to actually explode them out into separate parts. You have to do the same thing with graph as well, to like colorize them separately and whatnot. We just don't have that capability. There's a lot of power inside of Neutron that can't be exposed yet, where essentially it's almost like there's a vertex map now for splines, and it's useful within Neutron, but it's not too useful out of it because nothing knows how to read it yet. No materials can see it, and no like Redshift can't see those different colors. So it's like, oh, when that's implemented, that'll be pretty powerful. Let me jump around. Busy. Covered that one. Is it available to only Maxon 1 users? I guess it's available to anybody that gets the updates to the asset browser. I'm not sure if it's Maxon 1 because, you know, there's the new content. Actually, I might not have mine because I'm linked right now to like the special beta one. But under new content, you should, I think, anybody who's got an active subscription. Oh yeah, Maxon 1, I actually was confused about this. If you have a subscription, you should have this. Maxon 1 is owning Cinema and Redshift as a package. That's Maxon 1. But if you just own the subscription, then you should have this. And yeah, it would have probably appeared inside of your new content as well. But like I said, just search for FUI and you'll find both of them. These Redshift files won't work if you don't have Redshift. They'll still open, but it'll yell at you that you don't have the Redshift materials. Scrolling down. Yes, Mick, very good to be back. Hello. Connect doesn't work. Well, Connect does work, Tobias, but and you do have to use Connect to force the graph to refresh correctly inside of a fracture object, which is not surprising. Okay, cool. I'm going to check YouTube, see if there's any questions in this, and otherwise we'll jump into brand new questions. Marcelo was asking if you could assign different materials to it, to the pie chart. And yes, if you use fracture, that would totally work. Max would love to see some landscape stuff. Yeah, that would be, I would like to see that. And Neutron in theory is good at creating like a lot of copies of things. The one thing that is kind of tricky with Neutron is it even goes to like grid, where we did make this as a as a node thing. And just to show you here, just for fun, I'm still sharing. If I go into the node layout, I can drag a copy of the grid inside of here. And it's like, okay, so it also exists as a node. But here you can actually say edit asset. And once you edit the asset, then now we're inside of it. We go inside that group and you're going to see like this is actually what we had to do to make it. But that's far from everything because tons of these are groups where like inside that group, there's more stuff. I might be able to show you by selecting all and saying, can I ungroup? Right click, ungroup nodes. That might take a second. Yeah, there's a lot. Okay, so that's exploding out all of those, but even some of those groups might have had groups. So I'm going to say ungroup nodes. And there's more, so that's more stuff that was in there to make it, because, you know, somewhat organizationally. So there might be even more. So just to make, yep, you see there's even more inside of those groups. So yeah, there's all, and potentially there's more. I'm going to stop going deep. Yeah, there was some more in there. So like as we go deeper and deeper, now that's going to have made a giant mess here, of course. But you can see how many nodes it was needed to make that entire setup. And there's pretty much just as many inside of Graph. What was I saying? I was saying that Oh, landscape stuff. Oh yeah, I remember now. Anyway, you see all these different nodes. Now, Neutron is like designed to work in the system. The idea of capsules existing was kind of a later idea, but it's kind of like when you drag something in as a capsule, and we will be using capsules a bunch more as we go, probably just in random live streams, because I have found a bunch of cool uses for them. When you drag it in here, it's almost like it's emulating it. You know, like when you have you can play like Super Mario Brothers on your computer, it's running through an emulator. So it's like, oh, it's creating like a fake version of a Nintendo and then running that out of the computer. So this grid is going to be inherently slower because it's now living in this world of the object manager. So it's like it all has to get pre-calculated and then sent over to the object manager. So by this kind of retrofit into the object manager, there is more overhead. So working directly within Neutron will always give you a faster output. So something to keep in mind. But not super relevant right now, especially with not too many people going very deep inside of Neutron. Okay, reading through. Other than your products, are there any releases or news you were excited for since the last show? I will say Insidium did come out with that. They came out with a pretty neat tree growing or plant growing thing that I was watching the video of, and that was pretty cool. I did like the look of that quite a bit. And then we actually, only 2 days ago, we just started coding a brand new plugin over here, and it's different than what we've been working on. So I'm kind of excited for that one. I'll be chatting up a bunch of people at NAB to like get feedback on what they'd like to see in it, because I think it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be more useful to a lot of people. It's a different type of concept, but I can't say more because we're way too early in the process. Bhavana is asking if there's any way of feeding in real data into the graph. And I know everybody wants the CSV version. So and we did, even during the Maxon live stream, that was like 10 different people were like, how do we get CSV data? So I do wish we had been able to get that fully working. What's funny is there's even like a basic version in there, but it's like de-linked because I didn't like the way it was executing. As far as getting real data in there, I don't want to, like, there's no good way right now without going into the nodes of like getting a CSV going inside of it. And then I showed you that manual mode to like hit append and then like manually type in. Right now, that's going to be the best way of doing it. But, you know, keep an eye out for version 2.0. Not sure when that will be, but we've definitely heard you, and that is something that is wanted. Joel, I agree. Capsules were super smart. I wish capsules had been something they were thinking about from the very beginning, because it suddenly made capsules, or it essentially made nodes useful right now to artists right now without them needing to essentially need to know anything about nodes. I know I showed this in the live stream for Maxon, but it's just too useful. And I'll show it here as well. It's kind of like a little tip. So let's go back to our standard layout, make a brand new file, and I'll just keep it real simple. If we make a sphere, and I'll make a plane as well, just so we see, okay, so that's essentially the floor, and then we've got this sphere in that geometry. Of course, it pivots from the center point. But if you go into the asset browser, and I'm going to move into nodes, and you can search for it, but right now I'm going to go into geometry modifier, and I always like viewing this as a list, so I'll shrink that way down so we can read all the names. Anyway, this is a giant list, and the vast majority of these are parametric versions of things we already know, where we can do a parametric optimized, and we can do a parametric extrude. Like, just to show you, a lot of people probably know this, but we can grab this extrude and drop it on the sphere, and the instant I do, that is now I can grab this and change the settings and extrude the sphere in a very parametric way. But they have a couple here that we didn't have before. And one of them is geometry axis. And if I drag this geometry axis in as a child of the sphere, it's not going to do anything different right away. But I can now say I want this to pivot from, if I drag that up, this is now modifying the geometry. It's like it's acting like a deformer, but it's now modified the geometry and moved it all up into the air, 100% of its bounding box. And now you see, without having made anything editable, that is perfectly sitting on the ground. So it's like, oh my God, like we can finally make geometry sit directly there. If I select the sphere, pivot is still the axis, still right on the ground. So like right there, something super useful that nodes can do, and you've already got it. We probably could do that back in 24 if the geometry axis were there. I'm not sure if it was. It might have been. And then I'm not sure. Actually, let me do a test. If I put that sphere into a group, I'm going to pull out that entirely. And then if I make a second sphere, and let's move that sphere over here, I'm going to intentionally move it further down, and I put that in here. Okay, they're going to move up exactly their geometry. There's another one that I found very useful. I kind of demoed this already, but I'm showing you because I think it's useful. More people should know about this. So we need to grab a bunch of different models that are different sizes, just because it's a good opportunity to show it off if people aren't familiar. I am going to go and search for my gemstones. So I made myself a asset browser version of this, but if you go on Patreon, you can, if you're supporting on Patreon, you can get these gemstones for free from me. But I'm going to drag in these 10 different gemstones. Actually, we have to right click and load them. So now there's 10 different gemstones. Now they're built to pretty much real world scale. So they're really, really small. So these tiny little things. But let me select them all, say num times 3. And now you see I get this whole collection of different gemstones. They're really clean. I set up the UVs to work really well. And the geometry is all perfectly planar. So a lot of effort went into these. Like, this is like dozens of hours of work to make these from scratch, but it was really fun too. Anyway, you see all of these are slightly different sizes. If I make a null, I can select all those, put them into the null, and then in the assets browser, move back into the nodes. Don't search for gem. There's another one called, I think, geometry resize. I'm going to drag that and drop it here, and everything's going to explode. But I'm going to say, actually, I want to look at the object's Y scale, and then based on the Y scale, I want them all to be exactly 2. And now, based on the Y, look, they've all become exactly the same height. I can say all of you are exactly 3. All of you are exactly whatever size, and they're all equaling each other. That's another super useful one that we can do parametrically. We could do it here as the entire group on all that geometry. We could apply it individually to individual objects if we want to. So yeah, the combinations here start getting pretty cool. I had shown off a couple others. Those are the two that I think are going to be the most practical for people in general. But then there was one more weird one. Oh yeah, UV the mesh. Let's see if we can do that as a group. It might be, this is gonna be a giant mess if it works, but let me put it here. Yeah, it does apply to all of them. But anyway, we'll just do it one at a time. What that's gonna do is, parametrically, it's looking at the UVs of the object, because I made UVs, and now it's converting that geometry into that, and that is actually what is returned. So yeah, pretty cool there as well. Yeah, we have a scale, but yeah, another kind of new ability that we didn't have before. So yeah, pretty cool. Christian is asking about Blender geometry nodes versus C4D nodes. I don't know the Blender one, so I cannot compare. I will say that the way the Maxon nodes are designed right now, they're very deep. They're like they're low level nodes, meaning you're getting into like the nitty gritty math. And when you're building geometry, it's like you're building the geometry point by point by point. But then there are things like these geometry modifiers. So it's like if you stay in the world of this high level stuff, like these geometry modifiers, then I think they probably are a little bit more comparable. But when you're actually, like I'm making these tools, like we're building arrays and doing like very meticulous things. So there's potential at a certain point for Maxon to package these up differently or show them differently. Right now, they're allowed to go really deep. But I think for more artistically minded people, it's going to be good if there is a way of viewing them as like high level nodes that you have to be less worried about the math and like programming concepts and just be like, I want to link this to this and link that to that and link this to that, like that type of thing. But yep, we'll see where it goes. Lookalike, I can't think of any nodes that would specifically do anything interesting on a character. Like, if we had specific things we could try, but as far as just these really cool, handy, easy to do, drag it in and it does something cool, like none of them are going to be specifically character based. Let's see, will C nodes be rebuilt for each new version of Cinema, like plugins? I can't make guarantee. I gotta be careful about what I say. I can say that Maxon is making every attempt to have things not break. Even having said that, when they went from 23 to 24, I had made that city generator in 23. And then when 24 came out, it broke my city generator. But only 2 nodes had actually broken. So as I went through, I was able to figure out which nodes broke, brought in the new updated version and fixed it. And then it all started working again. So it's I'd say a vast majority of things as versions come out, a vast majority is going to be new additional nodes, additional functionality. And things only break if something changed. Like it used to be there and now it's changed into something new and works differently. That's the only time it breaks. So I would expect most things will work bringing them into newer versions. Of course, if you make something in a newer version, you can't go to an older version if one of those nodes didn't exist. So got to keep that in mind. Yeah, Joel, I would love to see fields and just MoGraph stuff in general working inside of capsules. They just haven't addressed that. They spend a bunch of time on splines, a bunch of time on geometry. But yeah, field stuff is not yet implemented. I'll say for myself, if I could have anything, and I think it would be a great platform for them to do nodes, I would love if they were making like a particle system out of the nodes, because that would just be like, oh, here's something that in native cinema we haven't had an updated version in a long time. So that would be a cool way of being like, hey, everybody, here's nodes. You should get familiar with them, and here's something you couldn't do otherwise. I think that'd be amazing. Epoxia, yes, long time no see. Yeah, it's no one. I do agree. Yeah, if we want things to get better, then things will break, things will change. We were lucky. Let me put it, how do we say this? For a bunch of years, for like almost like 6 years, they kept on adding things to cinema, but they didn't change any of the core, any of the engine. So fundamental things didn't change. And that means like plugins didn't break. We didn't have to recompile them and change things. Every once in a while you had to make a little tweak, but most of the time things just kind of worked. But because they've been making so many fundamental changes to the engine and the way things fundamentally work, and rewriting things and making things so they can go faster and making them more compatible with more modern like platforms and technologies and chips and everything, things will break. And we're now in this era of tons of things have been getting transferred over, and every version it's breaking plugins. So as things stabilize, we're going to see those things become way more mature and detailed. A way it makes me think is like in the GTA series, in the Grand Theft Auto series, where like when GTA 3 came out, it was like, okay, here's the raw engine. It can barely do anything, but look, it's 3D GTA. And then Vice City came out, and then suddenly it's like, oh, it's a more mature version. And now they have airplanes, and now there's motorcycles, and now the character can swim, and like more detail. And then when they came out with GTA San Andreas, suddenly it's like, okay, now it's become a mature engine and can do tons of things. And the map is huge, and look at all these cool things, because they had a platform in which to build up. So right now we're in that GTA 3 era where the fundamentals are getting built. And once those are built and things become really solid, then you can start building all the structures on top of it. So I'm not sure if that analogy works for everybody, but that's sort of a way I think of it. Forester, build nodes. Yeah, the CSV data inside of Neutron right now is you have to like parse it out and read it. And it's really powerful in very specific ways. I mean, even went to, you could actually do CSV data inside of Espresso, and I didn't realize that until like a year ago. Let's see, just checking on. Look like, I'm not sure about refresh issues in the viewport. I don't know about a specific instance of it. Scrolling. Okay, I think we've covered all of these things. Could we export to ZBrush? I'm not sure. I'm assuming you're asking about exporting the spline stuff I was showing to ZBrush. I missed that from earlier in the conversation. I'm assuming you are. I don't know. I'm not sure. I've opened up ZBrush a handful of times over the years, played with it, and it's like, wow, this is really detailed and really powerful and really neat. But ultimately, like, my headspace is not in like modeling, so I quickly move on to it and then kind of forget it all. So I haven't done a lot of back and forth with that. I'm going to scroll up back to some of the direct questions, but feel free to repost just because more people have popped up into the chat. Quick recap. Ask questions. I'm going to be scrolling through. I tend to alternate between Twitch and YouTube because both chats are here. If you have a link you want to do, you have to jump over to Twitch. Both platforms have their advantages. Like Twitch is more in real time and you get feedback quicker. You post links, but YouTube you can rewind, which is a really nice feature. Anyway, feel free to, if I tackle somebody's question and I didn't tackle yours, feel free to repost your question. Don't spam it. If you spam it, I'm going to get upset. I won't answer your question. If you keep doing it, then you'll probably get temporarily banned from the chat if you're annoying other people. So, but feel free to repost it so it kind of pops back up to the front. Also, something that was really handy last season is people started seconding something where it's like somebody would post a link and somebody would be like, oh, like Gumbo Inc. Like, I second Gumbo Inc.'s question. And it's like, okay, if people are extra interested in that one, then I'm more likely to go and tackle that as well. Having said that, if you do post a link, I need to see the artist or studio who made it. If I can't give credit, I'm not going to tackle it. And if it is some sort of longer video or it's a big complicated scene, you got to call out the aspect you're interested in. And really, I'm looking for your question on it. So don't post a link and be like, oh, whatever you think is cool, like tackle that. It's like, no. What do you want to know about it? And that's better for me to tackle, because otherwise it's easy to like weasel out and tackle an easy aspect of it or not do the interesting part. Oh yeah, and thank you. Tobias is also saying that don't forget to join the Rocket Lasso Slack channel. I'll post this in the YouTube as well. There's a link. You can join the Rocket Lasso Slack channel where there's all sorts of conversations going on, people helping each other. A lot of people from these chats will be hanging out in there in general. I also post that the live stream is live, so you can get an automatic announcement there. And I run, you can ask questions directly about the plugins. And yeah, besides the live stream, the second most likely place you are to get my answer to a question is probably going to be in that Slack channel. So yes, thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to scroll up a bit and let's see who actually snuck the very first question in. Ooh, Dean did. So let's see what you've got. Desktop. And click the link. I have to immediately mute the tab. I've gotten several like video claims from previous seasons because of music playing inside of like an Instagram video. So what do we got? First of all, this is from, ooh, that's a name. Geomergence. Different. Oh, I can already tell from looking at this that this is not going to be something I do. First of all, they did this with code and processing. So, and it's generative, and it doesn't look like it's animated. It's this still. This type of thing isn't, it's not the way cinema does things. Even now, like even if I was trying to think about this from a programming point of view, I am sharing the screen. Yep. You can see that essentially there are two different lines here. Like look at, we get this really sharp line and then we've got this wobbly line, right? But those two are perfectly matching each other, and then one looks like it's blending into the other. So while I can't, okay, I hope nobody considers this cheating. And like I said, somebody asked, the utility splines that I demoed at the end of last season, they still haven't launched yet because we got involved with the Maxon stuff. They are all but ready to launch. I just need to record the videos and get them shipped, so they will be shipping soon. Having said that, I think I want to use the utility splines to show this off a little bit. I'll explain the concept and what the utility splines is doing for us. But if you'll forgive me, this is just a decent example to show. Let's even do a pretty simple version of it. So I'm going to make it inside. And let's give it a bunch of segments. I'll say 64. So there are exactly, I guess we don't even necessarily need to use the utility splines. If we give this enough points, we might not need to use it. Anyway, I've got this perfect circle. But now imagine that we make you don't have to imagine, we'll do it. Make a duplicate of that end side. And with this one, I will deform the points. So by, well, let's do what's the best way? I'll do a random. So I'm going to drop that in. This random effector will be set to point mode, and immediately you see it explodes. It's going to be exploding in 3 dimensions. I would like it to just be 2-dimensional, so we will get rid of the Z. So 0, Z. And I guess this is going to be relative. I would like this to be based on the object, and now it should be flat. So you can see how it's deforming all over the place there. If we set these numbers to something small, and we need way more points. So I'll jump this up to, I'm going to say 640. I'm keeping those point counts the same, and you can see now we get these nice wiggles going all throughout. I would like to simultaneously push them further, but then also that's going to create some problems. So anyway, you can see how we've got that entire series from one setup to the other. And essentially what I think the other thing is doing is kind of blending between those. So with this setup, in fact, in order to blend, we'll see if Cinema allows us to do this. I'll put this random in both of them, but on one of them, I'll say you're 0%. So identical hierarchies, which means I should be able to create a cloner, put both of them inside the cloner. And I would like to do a linear set of clones. Don't move at all, and instead blend between. And I think we can do the color. I'm going to select both of them and say material custom. And one of them will be black, and the other one, let's go with a bright yellowy orange. Okay, so let's see if that works. No, I forgot the cloner is going to override. That's fine. The cloner is overriding the color, which makes sense. You see here, they're all being set white because that's set to white. In order to show this better, I will make these explode out more. So we're kind of going nuts there. But now that they're exploding out, I can also select the cloner, create a effector. The best way to do it is really to make a plane effector. I'm going to rename it .color at the end and say, don't affect the position, but yes, affect the color based on the fields. In the fields, I want it to go step by step. The best way for that is the step field layer. So that is now step field layer. I would like that to affect the color. And now this color gradient will be mapped on there. So now I can set that to kind of any setup that we like. So let's get a transitional color of a nice bright orange, and that will go, I want that to invert. So let's invert the gradient there. So now you can see we got one line there, and it's going from black squiggles to intermediate to white. Okay, now that I've done that, we should be able to see a little bit better. Go back to object. While I have it selected, it's going to all turn orange. So I will lock this in the interface, deselect, and now I'm seeing the original, but I still have my interface. And now we can increase the count. So I've got two different splines, and this cloner is blending between them because they have identical hierarchies. So increasing the count, you can see that I start getting this perfect blend between those two setups. So if we were to do enough of these, you're going to get this perfect blending where you have a perfectly straight line going all the way to this black one on the outside. So that is essentially what the concept is that they have going. Now, what I was saying, where I think my utility spline plugin would be useful, is we could now take this crazy squiggly line and start smoothing it out. Although things might explode, but you know what? Let's just give it a go. Under extensions, this is a plugin. It's not out yet, but I can use the smooth. This just shows again how important it's going to be to launch this because it's a really important tool. So if we take this one and I drop it inside the smooth, you can see that it's gone and taken that deformed line and it's really smoothed it out and make these really nice curls. Just to show you, grabbing the smooth, let me de-lock that interface. You see I have a certain number of iterations. If I increase the stiffness, you can see I can blend from the original to the smoothed out version. So yeah, by smoothing out a handful of times, we can round that out, which would give us a better blend between those two shapes. So, but we have to keep the hierarchies identical, so I'll make a duplicate of that and copy this in, and we'll see if that actually works. In fact, the second smooth doesn't need to blend at all. Actually, it might need to blend. Let's put that back to the same blend, which is 9. That way, when I turn this cloner on and we turn the colors on, yeah, look at that. So now we've got that smooth version going and you get that perfect blend going from one to the other. We could grab this original random and push it even further. Let's double that again. So it's going to push those out more, and yeah, we get those blends. So with that other thing being processed, it pretty much goes to, if we made enough of these lines, you're going to get a smoother and smoother blend between them. In theory, we could also just drop a loft on here and blend between, or just put a gradient on the loft, and that might be able to give us a singular one. But I think that this is pretty much the concept that they have going, and their basic shape had like all these crazy wiggle zigzags going. We have a simpler shape, but yeah, you see the concept there. Now, ours, we just randomly push them away. They might have more of a dynamic thing that's like properly pushing points away from each other so they don't like bump into one another. And if we did do some spline dynamics, we could probably do some sort of setup like that. But we'll see how it's going if people are digging it. Because I'd like to tackle like more questions. Okay, so everybody, don't forget, start posting some questions in. I will give this file a save. And actually, I have to temporarily hide the screen because I have to make sure it's not opening up a folder that it shouldn't be. It was not. So I'll jump back again. Okay, so anyway, here I am saving it into Season 4, Episode 1. And the important thing to note here is if you are supporting on Patreon, then you get access to these scene files. Unfortunately, I guess this one's not going to work yet because you don't have utility splines. So yeah, that's a that's an important variable here, but let's just call this one spline blend. And I think that pretty much covers that topic. Hey, Zach, welcome. And we got Fubi, Dean, Tobias, I Know One, V-Ruckus, Apoxia, Pier, Electron, Mick. We've got Gumbo, what's going on? Ian, Joel, some sort of Eastern European name that I don't even know the letters, so apologies. Bihavna, Geet, nice. Chop, Lookalike, I'm missing a bunch of names too, but we got more people. But hello, everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out in episode 1. Yeah, Geet, my original thought was that might be some sort of reaction to fusion, but the overall shape of it kind of implied that, and it might be, but I think you get the effect without doing that. Scrolling up to get to some questions. So show reel. A show reel is probably going to have way too many things in there. From Magic, let's see, mute. Let me just see if there's something specific. You're linked to Tavo, but let me check out. Yeah, that's going to be a giant show reel. They're going to do lots of gorgeous things. Like I said, if you got a link and it's got a bunch of stuff going on, you have to tell me the specific thing you're interested in, because I can't tackle everything inside of an entire demo reel. So I'm going to hold it off to the side. If you clarify, then maybe we can jump into it. Scrolling. Mick, what do you got? Any chance of creating something similar to this? Mute. Hang on, I gotta wait for the ad to finish. Oh, I think I recognize this. Is this gonna be another? Yep, it's a Nile Red video. Nile Red is, I do like the channel. Nile Red, if anybody isn't familiar, hang on, the ad's still going. Okay, cool. Nile Red as a channel, if you're not familiar, is really great. It's a guy who does chemistry, and he'll do like 2-hour-long videos where he's like trying to synthesize hot sauce from like rubber gloves, from latex gloves. And I don't know anything about chemistry, but it's just like riveting. Like you just stare at it and you're like, wow, it's so crazy. But anyway, in this video, he's doing a Pharaoh's Serpent demonstration. So let's see what we get. So yeah, this is going to create these crazy snake patterns. I'm going to speed it up because that's going a bit slow. Yeah, look at those super crazy. Man. Yeah, super nuts. So yeah, this is not trivial, but I do like the real world ones, both for their challenge and because, you know, we're not looking at what somebody else did. So we had the full range of our Cinema 4D to attempt to unleash and see if we can get working. Get the concept working. Okay, so yeah, I think I did tackle something similar to this, but let's do it. I don't ever mind tackling a question again, especially if it's from a previous season, mostly because we can try tackling it in some new way. Now, I do kind of remember the way we did it last time, and there were limitations to what we did last time. I'd like it to be different, but there are some key elements going on here that make it really difficult, because it's kind of organically generating, and as the pieces come out, they immediately stiffen, and then you'd see, like, when it falls over, that it's like, once it exists, it can't bend or flex anymore, but as it's being created, it's constantly warping and bending at the origin point. So what is the best way? If we did, my first thought was some sort of like spline dynamics, but I don't think you can make the spline dynamics stiff enough. Although I think it snaps back to their original position. But maybe if they break, yeah. We got to do a couple tests to see if we can get things working. So to begin with, I shall make a floor. So here's a floor object. And let's make a spline. Actually, yeah, let's make text. That's going to give us our best. Oh yeah, I forgot they moved text into its own menu. It's going to take a while to get used to that. I know why they did that. It's not the way I would think of it, but that floor is really bright. I'm going to darken it up so that you're not blinded in the stream. There we go. Nice dark one. So you see the text pop up. Okay, so floor, I'm going to select both of these. Right click, simulation, and soft body. And then the text is what's actually going to fall and be soft body. So you see it falls, it hits the ground, and it kind of falls apart. So that's all good. Oh yeah, and there's still that refresh issue in 25. So, cool. What I want is to get a bunch of subdivisions going onto this. Again, it would be a nice job for the utility spline, but for now, let's do a subdivided. So every 5 units, it should be subdividing. So hopefully the dynamics work on that. Now you see it looks a lot more like a string. Blurp. Okay, so here's the thought. If a couple things, we can speed it up. I don't care about self intersections right now. So under soft body, oh no, it's not soft body. Under collision, don't worry about self collisions. It should still look pretty much identical, but you see it runs faster. And then let us see if we can add a bunch of stiffness on here. So I'm going to like go overboard and set like 100 stiffness and see what happens. There'll probably be a little bit of a bounce. Boing. Yeah, you see how that's bouncing. In fact, yeah, all these letters are interconnected. That's fine. Let's just drop it to one letter. Let's just make that a letter R. And now we drop it and you see boing, it's kind of bouncing around and you see it's maintaining its stiffness. So here's the experiment we need to do to see if this works. Can we, oh, dang. I forgot. We don't have vertex maps for these. And without a vertex map, we can't use fields to drive the stiffness, which is what I wanted to do. So that means, it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means it has to be geometry. So I shall feed that into a loft and hit NB so we can see all the polygons. And let's make the letter a little bit beefier. Let me go with my old pal Lemon Milk Bold. I like that one. And then I want to see the surface all over the place. So change the loft cap, the case, the caps rather, to the Delani. And you can see we're getting these nice subdivisions. And we can expand that and set like a different percentage. And we can make that kind of be as many or as few polygons as we can get away with. We don't need anywhere near as many as we currently have. So I'll set that to 10. Yeah, that's going to cut that. Actually, I don't want it to take too long. So I'm going to set that to 15 and 90. And now you can see that it's a decently even distribution of polygons. If we put it all the way up, yeah, it's a little more even. So yeah, relatively even distribution. So instead of the soft body running on the text spline, I will drag the soft body onto the loft. It should be similar. It'll be a little different, but it should still run pretty quick. And you see we get a similar bounce and it falls over, boing, boing, boing. So yes, that's fine. That's mostly working. Now, we do have to make it editable. We could use recall, but we've already been talking some plugin stuff. So let's do this without a plugin. I'll just put that into a null, hide that, because we need to make this editable, because we don't need any of those tags. I just want that loft. Okay, now that we have this loft geometry, and that's just the letter R, which I'll rename, I need a vertex map. So select point mode so we can go into selection and create a convert or set vertex weight. 0 is fine. Okay, so now there's a vertex weight tag. Is there a way of, yeah, if I double click on that, we can change this to, I was just trying to invert it. There might be a selection or a way of doing that, but I'm just going to select them all again. Say select, set vertex weight, and I'll just set it to 100. So now you see it's 100% all the way through. So that doesn't do anything yet, but under stiffness, we can give that a weight of some sort. So let us drag the vertex weight into the stiffness, and that should be affecting it. Now, right now it's saying 100%, so it should look identical. Actually, it's just falling apart. So maybe it's different. Maybe it is the opposite. Because look at that explode. That's not what it did before. Yeah, that's kind of weird, isn't it? Why would that happen? All we've done is apply a vertex weight. Let's clear that out. Hit play. Oh, it does still explode outward. Isn't that interesting? Did we? I don't think we changed anything. Why would that be different? Deselecting all the points. Maybe points being selected did something for some strange reason. Let's go to selection, deselect. Okay, and now hit play. I doubt it'll be different, but let's find out. Nope, still explodes outward. Stiffness had the original shape. We dragged the tag in, didn't change that. Before it just moves straight down, we are not self-colliding. Automatic. Yeah, I'm a little stumped as to why those are popping out from each other. It's not necessarily going to stop us from doing what we want to do, but a little confused as to why that's happening. It's almost as if there's some sort of radius that they're pushing against each other. But I told it that it's ignoring its own self-collisions. Somebody's suggesting to optimize, but the way that that algorithm worked is these should already be optimized points. So I don't think that's strictly necessary. I'll delete the vertex tag just to see if that changed something for some reason. So now if I play, no, it still behaves the same way. So maybe it's the difference of it being made editable or not editable. That's what I'm going to go with. Let's just not worry about that aspect of it right now, because what I do want to do is drive the stiffness with that. So it's going to look the same. It's going to fall down. It's going to bounce and be stiff. Now, can we right now use fields to drive this map? And the idea here is, what if I made another object for this to collide with, like right here, and I'll move that text object way up. We need more frames, so 180. So here's the idea. If we collide with that box, I copy the tag over and I hit play, it should fall down. Ooh, oh no. It's doing that thing. That's apply to children, automatic collision shape, dynamic off, immediate. Even set that to box. It's doing that soft body thing. Come on, soft body. I was giving you all this credit here. It's a weird thing. And I'm not even sure it's what's doing it. Unless I'm missing something obvious. I guess that other one still existed and was still turned on. That could have been causing a bunch of the problems. Yeah, okay. A lot of that was my fault. When those were exploding, it's because I made a copy of a dynamic object, and there's two of them exactly on top of each other. That's what was going on. Okay, everything makes a little bit more sense now. Okie dokie. So that is now a box. That's going to collide with it. It looked like it was still a little bit chunky of a collision. You see it's still getting stuck, but you see how it's like bouncing around. Anyway, you see it's really stiff as it collides with this box. We might be able to make it a little bit nicer if we angle that, potentially round a corner, a small corner rounding. We'll just see what that does. Yeah, that's better. So you see it's really stiff as it hits the top one, but it's stiff as it hits the bottom as well. So here's the thought. Here's the test. I don't want to freeze that. What I would like to do is make a linear field. And now you can see that we're controlling the vertex map via the field. If I point the field up and down, it has full stiffness as long as it's up there. But now, as soon as it goes lower than this, it's going to have 0% stiffness. So it should essentially like just fall like a wet noodle once it hits the lower area. That's the thought. So here it should stiffly bounce on the rectangle. I'll even scoot that up a hair. Bunk. Oh, I should make that not a child, so it's not moving with it. So let's see, that's going to go bunk, stiff, and then it's still bouncing. Yeah, it has no stiffness, but still. Did I apply it? Nope, it's not applied. Probably should do that. Stiffness, okay. Take 5, boink, splat. There we go. So now you see a major difference. Bonk, blonk. Okay, so that gives us the ability to say, okay, at this point it was stiff, and at this other point it's not. So we have to do several other tests to confirm some things. Right now there's a lot of stiffness on it and all this shear inflection. What we want to do is make it... What's funny is we're going to eventually be doing the opposite, which is going to be easy to do. Yeah, let's see if this works. I don't know if it will, but back into the linear field, I want to invert this. So I'll flip it around. So now it's got no power, and then it's going to become stiff as it falls through. I'll make that pretty sharp as well. And now this will be interesting. So as it hits, you see it's going to scrunch, and it falls through, and now it's become stiff, which means it's going to jump back to its original position. Let's make it so that the structure is way weaker, and the flexion and shear are both way weaker. Essentially, it should be squishier now. Let's just see. So it's going to squish a whole bunch, and it's going to fall over, and then become stiff, and then jump back to its final position. Okay, that's all good. But then we've got elastic limit. An elastic limit is like plastic deformation. If something gets forced to move a certain distance, it's going to break that connection and lock it into a new position. So I'm not sure what a good number here is. I'm going to try 10. This is relatively small, so even that might not be small enough. And I want to see if we see a difference. So it breaks. Oh, this is looking good. Yes. Okay, it's behaving exactly the way I hoped it would. So here's what's happening. It is currently, it's got no stiffness whatsoever. So as it hits this thing, it's just completely crumpling. But we told it to break if it moves it too much. So it is. These are breaking into these new positions. As it falls through, like that whole leg right there is just like a wet noodle. But as it falls through this, it's turning the stiffness all the way up. But because we did the plastic deformation, it's now stuck in that new form. So even as it hits this ground and bounces, it's stuck in that new position. So that does open up some opportunities here. Hey, Simon. Welcome. Thanks for joining the stream. Always glad to see you. Monthlies. Yep, lots of people showing up. Lots of old school people, but I love seeing the new names as well. Anyway, continuing the thoughts here. This is good. This is actually a really good exercise by itself. So I'm going to save this file as it is. Again, you get these files on Patreon. We don't need any plugins on this one, so I can delete that. And we'll just say, I'll just call it plastic stiffness for now. Okay. So we've proved the concept. Now what we need to do, and I don't have a full plan here. We're just exploring techniques, but here's the thought. If I make some geometry and we properly subdivide it, that's not very much. I feel like we go further, but let's double those. So that should be, pretty quick to calculate. We don't need a floor anymore, not right away. So here's a thought. If I were to take something like this and animate it upward, as it passes through, it'll suddenly lock into whatever position that happened to be. That's the thought. So we're kind of secretly passing something up through the ground. And that means all dynamic forces are going to be getting applied as it goes upward. So we can get hopefully even a little fancier here. Let's make that even taller and double the count. So now it's, again, a square. And then let's zero out the linear field to be perfectly on the ground. So that's essentially ground level. Pull this down. And it's going to be dynamic as it kind of goes out. And we'll just have to see how that looks. I'm trying to think of how I can make this move upward. Because it has to be soft body, and moving something soft body is very specific. I'm going to copy the soft body tag up there. And all that's fine. Let's turn off gravity. Control D. Dynamics. Gravity 0. So now nothing should be moving. We don't need the, well, I'll just steal that tag temporarily. We don't need the R anymore, nor that. And we don't need that either. So I want that to be traveling upward. Let's just do the basic version and see if I can give it a custom initial velocity. So it's traveling upward. Let's try 500 and just hit play and see what happens. Okay, yeah, you see us moving upward. It's a little bit wiggly. That's all good. It's a little quick, so let's slow it down to 100. So that's now traveling upward at a reasonable-ish rate. And it should just keep going. Now, the tag will be dragged on there, and it needs to be made editable. Again, I'll make a copy and turn it off. Now it won't be colliding, just in case we want to go back and change our point count, which is highly likely. Now I can hit play. If I copy this tag up, we should actually see it. And now it's fully stiff, and then it's becoming not stiff as it moves up. So I was going to say we want the opposite, but I think we actually want something even fancier than that. I think we want a limited window where this works. So here's the thought. Remapping, contour mode, curve. So now I've got a curve that I'm working with. So right now it's fading up as it goes. But what if we fade up and then fade back down again? So now it's stiff in the middle. I want the opposite, so I'll pull that up, down, up. There. So now you can see only in between there is there anything happening. Now I want that to be pretty extreme, so we can pull those handles down. So it's going to be mostly red in between. And now if I make that larger, you can see that there's a small window in which it's not stiff. Excellent. Then let's make a turbulence or something really strong. We'll start with turbulence because it's really simple. Field forces could be good as well. But under forces, under simulate forces, turbulence, this is going to be like super crazy, moving all these points all over the place. Let's give it a decent amount of power. 55, you'll always see it, even if it's not too strong. And it should have some scale. The scale, you should think of, even though it says percentage, it pretty much works like a unit would. So 100% is like 100 units. And right now, this cube is 200 units. So the noise scale is about half of that, which is a very reasonable scale. So yeah, let's try that and just see what happens. And it's applying everywhere. So as soon as I hit play, you're going to see this whole thing is like wobbling all over the place. But keep in mind, there's no stiffness everywhere. I'm sorry, the whole thing is stiff. So it's applying everywhere and moving around. Here's the trick. I'm going to, in that turbulence, also turn on fields and limit it to that same linear field. So now it might be the opposite. Right now, either the force is only going to happen in this little window or it's happening everywhere else. So if I hit play, we'll see what happens. And it might be happening everywhere else, which is kind of what I guessed. So under our modifier layers, I'll say invert. So it should be the opposite now of that. And the reason I'm doing an invert there is that way we can always change that original linear field, and it's going to be both referencing in the vertex map and in the turbulence. So let's see. Now that, okay, well, you see in the very beginning, actually, to make it really clear, if I take our entire rig and move it down more, if that is smoothly moving up and just continuing straight, then it is correct. And yeah, see, straight up. And now as it starts entering this space, does it start like falling apart? Yeah, now you see it starts moving, which is pretty much what we want. Okay. Inside of, I'm going to save this file as 2B, and then plastic stiffness ribbon. Okay. Oop. Saving that just in case, because it's really easy to accidentally break your soft bodies if you like change them at the wrong time. Anywho, in this vertex map, it is being affected here. Inside the soft body, under our soft body, this tag that we copied over needs to be dragged into the stiffness. So now, when it's in between that window, it should also not be stiff. So let's see what happens now. Let's double check. It says those are not. The whole thing is still, it might be too gently moving. So that's a possibility. So let's see, what's the best way to do it? I'm going to crank the turbulence strength like crazy. I'm going to make it smaller so it's more chaotic. And it's a bad idea, but let's make it 10 times as strong. Hit save and then hit it play and let's see what happens. Okay, well, we definitely see that deform, but the whole thing is still moving as a unit. And yeah, there's so much power there. It is affecting everything. I know I'm moving up. We had the fall off happen. I guess we could have the entire thing, like the stiffness only happen above the fall off. So if we are doing that, I do need a second linear field. And then this one can indeed be, I'll just reset this spline. Linear. And now the field will not see that one. It'll see this first one. And I want to invert. So now that's where the stiffness gets applied, but the turbulence should still be seeing this original one. I'll just make it a child of that so I can tell. Anyway, the reason, if there's no stiffness here, then the whole thing should be able to be floppy, and hopefully it doesn't, the deformation doesn't push back to the lower ones. Although it still is. That's a little, at this point, I feel like we should start seeing what I was hoping to see. But the entire object is getting that applied. I'm going to temporarily grab the elastic limit and drop it really low. See if that does anything. The whole object's still getting whipped around. There's things we can do to compensate, and you can see that it is getting a little bit bent, and then it's kind of remembering that bend, but it's not quite what I want. I'm going to scoot that down a little bit. So now that's going to be the deformation area, and then it gets the stiffness applied. So the concept is where do you see once it does escape to this upper area, that it is locked into this new position, which is what we want. Instead of flinging it or just counting on flinging it upward, let us, we can make just a wind and blow it upward. It's not the most elegant, but if we make a wind and aim it straight up, that's going to be continuously applying a force to it. So it won't want to decelerate. So you see it keeps moving upward at least. The turbulence I will make, I mean, I thought that was going to be too strong, but let's go even stronger. And then I'm thinking we want to trap this in some sort of box. Oh yeah, and Elaine FX. The reason I'm not keyframing it is it's a soft body with no collision or anything. So after the initial state, keyframes don't mean anything. Dynamics completely take over and ignore anything keyframes would have done. Anyway, here's the thought. What if we trap it into kind of a small box as it's launching up? I know we're getting a little bit, the rig's getting a little more meticulous than I want it to be, but it's still showing some potential. So I still want to keep playing around with it a bit. Okay, so here's the thought. I'm going to trap it inside of a box until it gets into like this deformation zone, like right around there. And then it's free to do whatever it wants. So that becomes a simulation collider body. And I'll tell it to calculate as a box. We'll see if that just works out of the gate. Creating a duplicate of it, I can say set that to -z. And now you see it's trapped in between those two. And then if we want to go even further, I'll make another one. Set that to 0. Scoot it off to the side here. And one more. -x. So you can see I've trapped it in between 4 boxes. The reason I didn't just put that in a rectangle is this cube-based collision is going to be more accurate than if we did something that was just mesh-based, in theory. Anyway, the whole thing's getting flung up. It shouldn't be able to really deform inside of those boxes. We should probably visually hide those. What I like doing is selecting anything I want to hide and say render tag display. I would like to display in the viewport as a line. So we can see them represented as these boxes, but it doesn't stop us from seeing our fall offs and the original geometry. Hitting save, hitting play. Okay. Mostly working, but it is stopping very quickly. Actually, you know what's probably happening is there's probably a lot of friction happening. So let's select all of those cubes and say no friction, no bounce. It should just slide right past them. So now hit play, and indeed it does continue. That the friction was what was stopping it. And then it seems like the whole thing's decelerating quite a bit. So let's make the wind stronger. Actually, 40 is regular gravity. So now 40 should be equivalent to gravity being upside down. So that's going to really force it upward. And you can see that, yes, indeed, we do get this really deformed shape. Okay, cool. The fall off is pushing everything up at a certain point, and then it's going to hit that stiffness field and then get locked in. Now, I do like this locking in. That's something we've never really gotten before. So as a technique, that's pretty new. So then, save. Several things. How fast is this running? Yeah, it's over 100 frames per second, 140. So I'm going to double our geometry. So I'm going to select all the polygons and hit US, and now you see it's actually doubled our polygons. So each single, actually, I'm sorry, it's 4 times as many polygons. So let's see what our frame rate is, because each polygon became 4 polygons. Hitting play, it's still running at it's more than 30 frames a second. So now there's just more detail, and you can see we're getting a better twist on it. So, okay, good. Everything's working fine. The wind is now too strong, I think. The turbulence is probably too strong. I mean, it's quite strong. So let's drop it down to about half. And that's going to push it up. And you can see this nice twisting going on. We do release it at a particular point. It's getting all super messed up inside of this linear field. And it doesn't stiffen until it gets up into that field. That's a little bit dangerous. I feel like there should be more overlap there, but let's just see what happens if I do make them very similar. And let's start our ribbon down even further so it's not already in it. Okay, cool. Having done that, it goes up. Twist, twist, twist. Yeah, the stiffness being lower means it's already got some stiffness, which means it doesn't want to deform as much. It's definitely something to keep in mind. So, oh, no, we want lots of turbulence. We want less stiffness transition. That'll happen pretty much at the end again. The tricky part for me goes to, that is going up and it suddenly becomes stiff. I guess we could do it off the origin point. But what I want to have happen is right now gravity is pushing upward. But it's like once it comes out of the bottom, I kind of want gravity to come back again. So then the top, as it comes out, it's going to want to flop over. Right now we're kind of making a crispy bacon geometry generator. So right now the wind is everywhere. We'd have to give it its own fall off and then make a second one. We can also do a field force. We'll just do it with this right now. So linear y plus possibly y minus. Oh, the wind's rotated, so that maybe makes sense. Anyway, let's just arbitrarily give this a guess. We'll have gravity turn off as soon as it gets to here. I might be the opposite, so let's see if it moves. Very slowly. No, I think that was correct. Maybe. No, hard to tell. But yeah, I think the wind is falling off as it gets there. We can make that really sharp, actually. So pretty much like it's got gravity all the way through there. Yeah, that does indeed work. Actually, no, it seems to shoot out. Is all the energy gone once it's there? Yeah, that doesn't seem to be speeding up at that point. It does travel upward. I know how to tell. Let's turn off the initial velocity. Dynamics, no custom initial velocity. So now there's no forces. So if it starts moving up, it's because wind told it to move up. And indeed it does. So wind is telling it to move up quite a bit. It's really fast. We could slow it down by doing wind. We'd also slow it down by doing things like drag and also linear damping. So let's try doing 99% linear damping. See what happens. So that's consistently draining energy out from the system, like way too much, but that's what it's doing. Let's drain 90% out. You see a big difference between 90 and 99. It's still trapped in the not stiff zone. It's really interesting the way the turbulence is interacting with it. I suppose we want the wind to go up higher. But then all this chaos happens here, really telling it a particular spot. It's almost like it needs a local linear field. We could also do a growth, but it's tricky. I'm thinking right now we're doing this all with like linear fall-offs. There's other methods we could do. Definitely other methods we could do. I don't want to, we're spending a lot of time on this. It's fun. I'm enjoying these dynamic processes, but it would also probably be good to get to another question if possible. So as that goes up, I mean, we could just go and make another gravity that starts here, but there's so much kind of crazy stuff happening right here. I'm almost feeling like what we'd want to do is, I guess it turns more into a timing game. That's what I'm going to try. So nothing else will change. I'm just turning off that linear field. And that means the vertex map on the actual object is the only thing that is changing. So here's the thought. It needs an initial state Is that a good idea? I mean, it is. I'm trying to think of how to trigger it. We could just do a initial state. Is there a way of making an automatic initial state? I think it might only do that when it's first created. So it's like a special secret property. If I say set that to 100, then it made turn on fields. You see that has a freeze. I guess it's just a freeze. Anyway, that's a freeze. But if we set the freeze to grow, and it's 10 units right now, strength of 100. If I hit play, you should see, yeah, see how that's naturally growing? So now it's based on like just a growth age, and it's got nothing to do with how far it's moved. So that's a thought. So now once it's passed through, it's kind of like, oh, I've, you know, the stiffness has been applied, so it just is what it is. This might even be more simplification we can do. Here's something that's interesting. If we turn off the linear field inside the turbulence, this is kind of neat. Let me show you what I'm thinking. Turn off the wind. So now it's just going to sit there. If I hit play, you're going to see it's going to slowly infect. But you see it's going from 0 to 100%. So the thought is, what if instead we increase the radius to like 25, but we do an effect strength of like 5%. So the idea is it should start spreading out slower. You see it's more of a smooth gradient. And I think I want even more. Let's do an effect strength of 1 and a radius of 50. So that's going to slowly grow. You see what we're getting now is a lot of orange. It's not as quick as I want it to be. So let's go 4 times as fast. Yeah, okay, that's a little bit better. So you can see a smooth gradient from red to yellow. Yellow should mean 100% stiff, right? But it doesn't have to. So here's the thought. Instead of this passing through a turbulence, and the turbulence could be anywhere, we're going to say, actually, when you're a particular age, turbulence is affecting you. That's the thought. So this one, we'll rename this vertex map to grow. That's going to be the grow vertex map. And then inside of the turbulence, I guess it'd be nice to visualize this. This might be easier for people to understand what I'm getting at. This one I'll just call that this tag turb for turbulence. And it's not going to be frozen. What this one's going to do is reference the original one. It's also really important to rename these to different names, otherwise they won't work. Anyway, by dragging in grow into the turbulence tag, we are now seeing the same thing. But I could remap that. So inside of the modify layers, I would like a curve. And now it's going to go from 0%, which is red, all the way up to full power, and then back down again. And what that gives us is a stripe in the middle. So only when it's in this in-between part is it doing anything. So based on this, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set this to linear. And now I can just draw these as like linear points, which is probably going to be a little bit better. We do a little bit of a transition. But now as this growth happens, it's going to be like, hey, oh, you know what? I want that to be the opposite. Let's flip this horizontally. Oh, sorry, vertically. There. Okay, so how stiff is it? It's 100% stiff. At a particular point, as it's growing, that part is really weak. And then it's going to become stiff again. But keep in mind, at the very beginning, everything's stiff, and then suddenly it's quickly allowed to deform, kind of at the tip, moving downward. That's pretty much exactly what I want. So now the turbulence is going to be told that you are not waiting for a linear field. You are based on this tag. I guess it's the inverse of this tag. So I will, again, flip that vertically. So this is what this tag is now defining is the turbulence. Whoa. Yeah, it's defining the turbulence. And anywhere it's yellow, that's where the turbulence is affecting it. So turbulence, affect only that tag. So let's see what happens. Let's see if we turn off those cubes. So let's see. Say play. The whole thing is twisting about. But you can see that it is all like rigid until that yellow stripe goes through, and it is able to deform a little bit. Now we did turn off the wind. That will be turned back on again, but I want to see if this growth concept was working. Seems to mostly be. We need the freeze to be quicker. So yeah, it's really slow. I'll double the speed, see what that does. So that's deforming. It's not deforming too much, but we got to keep in mind that the stiffness is its own thing as well. So currently the stiffness is not anything. Everything's super stiff, so no wonder it's not changing. And now let's take a look at this one. This is where things are stiff, and it's kind of like we want the opposite of this. No, that's not true. We want that to be stiff, and we want that. So we kind of want this, but the inverse of it. So we'll just do that by duplicating, and I'll now reference the turbulence and just invert the result. So with any luck, oh, and we need to rename it. So this will be stiffness. Okay, cool. So now we hit play. That should be applying the stiffness tag. So that actually does need to get fed in. Boop. And now it should be maximum turbulence, no stiffness. Okay, there we go. Look at that deformation we're getting now. See, oh, look at that. Okay, this is cool. Because now we're getting perfect deformation traveling through the model and then sticking to a new position. Like, that's pretty cool right there. It's got nothing to do with the movement, but we can just see it growing and deforming as it goes. Very nice. This is a more elegant version of the same concept, so I like that a lot. We do still have the problem of this thing actually animating upward, and like I say, there's not a lot jumping out that's going to help that. If we wanted to make a more stable animation right here, keep in mind you could do things like give this a bunch of follow rotation, and that should stick that pretty well. And now we should, I guess we can give it follow position as well. So if you just wanted to make a cool animation where this was deforming as it goes down, you could just add a bunch of stiffness, and now you can see the growth travels through and we get this deformation. So, you know, kind of neat for that. As far as this traveling upward, the upward movement is utterly unrelated to this growth. And because those two things are decoupled, it does mean the speed traveling through isn't going to be terribly powerful for us. That's really cool, though. Blub, blub, blub. And then I wonder if the different turbulences, how different they'll look. We don't need you anymore. If there's right now it's a very powerful turbulence, and the scale's medium. I'm going to make the scale really small and see what it does. Yeah, you see with it really small, you see just this random jerkiness. If we make it really large, now we're going to get smoother waves in between. So yeah, see these big wafting type of waves. It's kind of cool seeing that over time. So yeah, just by changing the scale, we're going to be getting very different deformations on that. I like it. So, how do we want the growth is going down? Okay, I've got some addition. Well, we're still having to stick it in place. That's the part that's bugging me. I guess we could lock it down with two connections. Let's go step by step. So, currently, we've got this ribbon, and this line you'll see is going to be just slowly going from yellow or from red to yellow. That's all that one does. So what we could simultaneously do is say wind is going to appear anywhere that yellow is. So that's what we'll do. Under this, let's say, okay, there is wind, and the wind is going to push down, and the wind is going to be limited to anywhere that there's yellow. So we could drag that in. If we wanted to, we could even crank up the contrast a whole bunch. But let's just try this by itself. I don't think this is going to look like much of anything. Or I don't think it's going to look too different because right now we have all this follow position and rotation. So if I play, it doesn't look too different. If we get rid of the follow position and rotation, unfortunately, I think the whole thing's just going to fall. Oh, no, actually, the wind is blowing upward. So yeah, you see the whole thing's getting blown upward. What I really want is that to be inclined to like flop over. The wind isn't super strong right now. I will make that stronger. And I will flip it the other direction. So we'll flip that to -90. So it's actually gravity. It is actually pushing down. But of course, this will push everything down. Everything's going to get pushed down because the entire thing, like there's a relationship between all these different parts. So the whole thing in general will blow downward. if the stiffness is what the stiffness is currently based on this, which means the whole thing's there. So, and then, yeah, the stiffness travels straight down. So here's a thought. I don't know if it'll work, but let's bring those cubes back. And currently, I'll just make them a lot shorter. Yeah, make them shorter. And that kind of comes like a, it's almost like we're planting this. This is like a pot we're putting it in. And if I reset the transform, I guess it's offset. I'm just going to make that like a floor. So in theory, the bottom can't go down. So the wind can't blow the bottom down because it's going to collide with that, and it's trapped inside these walls. So it's kind of trapped in that little, like, you know, envelope slot in there. And then the whole thing travels down, and there's a wind that's blowing down on only the line. So hitting play, let's see what we get. Oh yeah, you see that is kind of there. But then the turbulence is really strong. The turbulence might yank the whole thing up because the turbulence is strong. Now, the turbulence has been wonderful. It's been doing a great job for us. I'm going to turn it off and do a field force. So simulate forces field force. And the reason I'm doing a field force is because I want a two-dimensional noise. Now, the turbulence was crazy strong. I'm going to start out with 555. And we will, that's the direction. This is the limit. So I'm going to say limit to the first one. Yeah, that's what the wind used to be. It's just the grow. That's what field force is limited to. Currently, there is no direction. This is just the amount of power. So I wonder what would happen if we just applied the gravity straight down, just for fun. If I make a solid, we can say that a solid is just a direction given a field force. Oh, I'm in field. Make sure that you do it in the object. So I would like that to be a solid. What direction? -1, which would be down. -1 in Y. So now it's really strong going down. It's only going to affect things that have turned yellow. So we have play. The only thing happening is yellow is getting pushed downward. And indeed, you see the bottom is getting stopped because of all the stiffness. Although it did sneak through. That's kind of funny. The stiffness, yeah, that should be fully stiff, but it's still able to sneak through. Having said that, that might be because we did make a very small elastic limit. So we could start increasing that, see if that helps. It still collapses, but that might not be surprising. And this wind is quite strong. I'm not surprised. Let's lower that. Oh yeah, you just see that little deformation as it pushes down, that little wave traveling through. Yeah, I just want to see what happens if we push down. So, okay, so instead of the solid being there, how about we give it a direction of 1, which is on X, and then this always gets tricky. I want to remap it, remap the value. So that's 1. And I want to remap the value. Is it remap? Quantize remap. I thought there was a numerical one. I guess this is numerical. Remap those values from there's got to be a better way. Is there not a really simple way of doing that? Like even the curve, like there's no numbers associated with this. I want literal numbers. But remap is like these curves and like sliders and percentages. Remap. Oh, range map might be what we want. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Range map. That's what I wanted. Oh, and Zach, you were you typed it out before I thought it, but after I thought of it myself when it popped up. Anyway, this is currently going from 0 to 100. I would like it to, I think, go from -100 to +100. So hopefully that means this is pushing equal amounts forward and back. But I don't want it to be a solid, actually. I want that to be, oh, dang. It can't be a solid because it's all there all the time. So it has to be like a noise on a solid that gets range mapped. That makes sense. We have to unclamp, we have to apply a random field. We can actually see it here. Apply a random field, which will be set to multiply. And there we go, 2 directions. So let me show you what's happened. So currently everything is pushing to the right, positive X. And then we're multiplying by this field. So that's now, actually, some are turning blue, which is implying that some are going negative already. I'm going to kind of ignore that. And so now this should essentially be somewhere, this solid is returning numbers somewhere between 0 and 1. And now I'm saying, well, take 0 to 1 and actually map it from -1 to 1. So it should be, in theory, pushing left and right on X. So if I play, let's see if we get anything. I think it might be in this no, it should be in this orientation. Okay, it's a little bit weak right now. Let's crank up the power. Do it again. Okay, you see a little wiggle traveling through, like wiggle, 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 wiggle. Random field needs to be way larger, I think. Okay, oh, good, good, good. Back up to our 2000 probably. Yep, okay, nice. 2-dimensional, and we're getting back up to that proper amount of strength, and it's only pushing left and right. I mean, it can spin, but yeah, you see it's 2-dimensional. Actually, it's 1-dimensional right now. We could make it 2-dimensional by making a group, feeding all 3 of these into said group. And then can we copy a group? Copy, oh, duplicate. Nice, okay. So that was pretty simple. You see I was able to duplicate that. And now this solid, I'm gonna say, actually, solid, you are 0, and then Z is 1. So now that one's going left and right. The noise applies to it. We could give it it's a copy of the noise. So it would be a good idea to make a second one. So this random noise is X and this random noise is Z. So they're different. And now we replace X with Z. Make sure that Z has a different seed. And now those are doing slightly different things, pushing in 2 different directions. Those field forces, these 2 unrelated ones, I'll say add on top of each other. So now it is 2-dimensional. You see there's nothing pushing up on Y, and that's what we just built. So that's where field forces get really powerful. Specific and meticulous, but powerful. And now these are pushing in 2 dimensions instead of just 1. And now we get perfect bacon. And we get perfect bacon without it being pushed up or being pushed down, is what we did right there. Now, having said that, we do have this wind, and that this wind is being told to push at that same spot. So it's pushing straight down, but without ever yanking it up. And what I really, well, the thing we're lacking, see, everything deforms, and that becomes stiff. Yeah. This might end up just being a bacon generator, because what I really want is much like the reference, which we haven't even looked at since the beginning. Pulling this back up again, is you see it's like the entire thing kind of pivots from the growth location, like the entire thing can bend from there. And that's kind of what's happening here, but it's not, these other ones aren't allowed to move. And it's not like those are pivoting from here. It's just that these are the only ones moving. So yeah, those aren't pivoting from here. They're just stuck now in their global location. So yeah, if those aren't going to flop over, and those flopping over was going to generate all the dynamics for us. Come back, bacon. It's really cool. It's a cool technique. It's something we've never tried to do, is like this deforming generation where something becomes re-stiffened after we deform it in a way. I really like the exercise. It's a good tool to have in the toolbox. And we might be able to apply this technique in some other ways, but I'm starting to think that to properly do a lot of what we just saw, we'd probably have to get like espresso involved. And then what I'm thinking is this very similar concept, but imagine we made a series of probably spheres, like it's like a sphere, 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 and we interconnect all of them as a giant dynamic chain. And all of those would have like ragdoll connections, so they could pivot in every single direction. So, you know, it's like a necklace getting stacked perfectly up. And then much like we're suddenly making them stiff here, we would suddenly, at a certain point, activate a fixed connector. And I think the fixed connector would lock it into whatever current position it was in. In order to activate the fixed connector, it would need espresso or, manual keyframes, which would be crazy given this. So the idea would be you build a giant stack of spheres, and then they get pushed upward. And as they're getting pushed upward, you have the same turbulence effects, like blowing them left and right. And then once they get to a certain point, they would lock in their new rotation. So you can imagine like a sphere stack, and it's like tilted over, tilted over, tilted over. And then it would suddenly lock in that position. The difference between that rig and this one is while this lower one was still allowed to pivot, it would allow all of those top ones to fall over. So the entire thing could be blowing in a particular direction and getting locked and getting locked and getting locked. Where in this, as they blow upward, they're not inclined to pivot over. They're just stuck and they keep moving up, and then just the section is being modified. So that's where I'm at with that. If somebody asks that as a follow-up question next week, we could tackle it again, but we have spent a lot of time on it right now, and I would like to at least tackle one more small question, if there is one. I have lost... Oh, there it is, behind here. So, what do we got? Elaine FX has a question. This pin art toy, can we do something like this? Let's check it out. Pop it open, mute the tab, hit play. Oop, yeah, I muted the tab, but let's let the ad go. An ad for Verbo, whatever that is. Okay, let's move this over and see what we... Well, first of all, this is from Ericos Partheniu? Pin art toy animation. Okay, this looks like a... I wonder who... I want to give credit, but I just got to say, there's not too many views, and he's only got 9 subscribers, so I want to make sure that we give proper credit. Oh, it's a pin impression. It's entirely possible that I'm not accusing this person of doing it, but I made a GSG tutorial that was entirely based on this type of thing. So, yeah, literally I, in the past, made a tutorial based on this. I don't know if it still exists on some form on GSG, but we can take a quick look at the idea. So the actual name of that toy is called a pin-pression. Moving into cinema, I will save our crispy bacon generator. It'll be BC plastic stiffness bacon. Okay, new file. Pinpression. I'm trying to think if we get some new ways of doing it, because I do have some thoughts. Is there a way we could fully keep it two-dimensional? What we did in the past was we took a model of some sort, or even a person, but what you need to do is get a depth mat of them. So in cinema, you would just create a fog or a depth mat that would perfectly show that shape, and that gives you the perfect depth. But that requires making that shape, making the depth map, exporting it as an animation, bringing it back in again. So it's a big multi-step process. I'm going to attempt to do it with a completely different technique, although I don't know if it'll work or not. So here's my thought, trying to skip those steps. We can make our bed for the pinpression, and we want it to be an even subdivision. And I think we've got a luxury of being able to put a decent number of subdivisions here. So let's say 40 by 40. Okay, yeah, 40 by 40. And we could use the tension. We'll do two different things right now. First of all, let's pull up a model of some sort. So I'll search for objects, and let's see, I want a person of some sort. Let's just search for human, see if anything pops up. Is there the... Yeah, here we go. The zygotes, that's what I want. Zygotes. It's just a... Let's just grab one of these. I'll just grab one I've already downloaded before. Nope, man shopping. That's fine. I just need to steal his head anyway. Okay, so sorry, fella. We just need your head. Boop. Okay, so there's a head. Scale it way up. And I'm going to even reset the transform. And bigger. Okay, maybe not quite that big. Okay, so essentially you imagine you want to do something like that, right? So I want to say the simple way. We'll see if it works. It may or may not. Let us put the face right up against the edge there. Keyframe Z position. Go to the end of the animation and push it as far as we want that to be. Even that's probably decently extreme, but it should be fine. And yeah, so that face pushing through. So the potentially simple way, but I think that might lack in some detail. Let's see what happens. Is the one I rarely use, and I can't remember the name of it, but I will see it. The collision deformer. So collision deformer, and that is going to do what? Well, a bunch of things. It is a fall off. I haven't done this in a bit. It needs to be intersecting from something. This is the head moving. Hopefully this is safe. I'm going to put the entire thing into a connect object. I don't want it to weld, but that is now treating it as one object, so that will just be the face. And I'm going to say, okay, you're seeing the face. Okay, the instant I drop it in there, you see something indeed has happened. Let's hide the original face. And you see that that has pushed, it kind of made Batman. It did make an impression on there. If I hit play, let's see what happens. You're going to see that. That's not much of anything. What's going on here? What? Oh, I guess, oh. It's probably because this face is not at 0. Reset transform. There we go. Sorry about that. Put the face there. Okay, that should work better now. So I play, and now you see the face is starting to push through. So I'm going to hide the face, and let's just look at the end result. And you see that it is indeed pushing forward, and it's looking pretty good overall. But once we get to a certain point, they're going to pop inward. So that's kind of one of the problems with this technique. Having said that, there are settings and options inside here. We'll see if any of them do anything for us, but I'm not going to spend too long on them. So we got a fall off. I'm going to try a surface fall off. Nope, that didn't do us any good. Collider fall off, way slower. None distance based, but yeah, I think that's like a fall off. That's not going to continue them pushing forward. Advanced step, stretch. Like there's a lot of settings here, and I don't have a good intuition for them. Yeah, I do not have a good intuition for him. Trying to think. I try not to interrupt the stream while people are, coming in saying hello. But yeah, continued hellos to everybody who's popping in. Welcome to season 4. Welcome Pure Solid State and Hast and Twirl and Jed and Double. What's going on, everybody? We got Basher and Jai, Bubbles, Betson. Welcome, everybody. But anyway, we're kind of seeing some limitations of what the collision can do, and potentially there's ways we could push it further and even potentially layer up more than one and then have them kind of cascade through. Of course, my intuition on these things is going to be to go with some dynamics. And I wonder if we can get away with some cloth here. I'm not sure, but the reason I want cloth is because we can like lock some, we can pin some things in the edge, but I feel like, yeah, I don't know. We'll just have to see. Okay, so we got this cloth, and let's make this a collider. So that will be a cloth collider. We need to turn the gravity off. This has its own system, so we'll say forces 0. And I expect this not to work great out of the gate, but let's see what happens. Hit play, and now let's see what's happening. Okay, so not much. The face is passing through. Oh, I remember. The unfortunately, the cloth collider can't be on a parametric object. It has to be on not a parametric object. So I'm going to manually copy this collision to, I see the head's made of a bunch of different parts. I didn't want to, but I'm going to make it editable. I've baked it down, but now the keyframes are gone. So gotta do that again. Keyframe, end, push it through. Oh, not that far. What am I doing? Right there? Okay. So let's see what happens now. Oh yeah. Oh no, it's got the collider and still not colliding. Come on. What are you doing to me here? No gravity. And yet nothing. Curious. Oh, the plane needs to be editable as well. Womp, womp, womp. Make that editable, and now the cloth will see it. Yeah, it just goes to it's an older system, so it's got more quirks. So no gravity. Now that should actually collide. Now you see it's actually pushing. Now you see they do have an interaction with each other, which is what we need to avoid. Now, let's see if we can do something about that. No self-collision. There's the point collision, everything with the original object. So we've got all these different tag settings, and these are things like the flexion. I'm going to say no flexion and no stiffness. And essentially what that should mean is there's no relationship between any of these pieces, and it's just going to push them. The problem here is you see they're going to continue to drift, and don't want that. Okay. So, yeah, not working great there. I'm going to delete those. The original one I was going to reach for, and then I stopped. Collider body. The face will now be a collider body, and it is going to be based on a moving mesh, and then this one's going to become a soft body. Soft body. There's going to be some problems with this one, though, as well. Control D. Gravity 0. Okay, so same concept. The dynamics will work better here. You see those are clicking, but those are working well, but the entire sheet is moving forward. So let's say that there are no self-collisions, and there's no structure, there's no shear, there's no flexion. Essentially what we said is like there's no relationship between these individual parts. So essentially it's like we've got a bunch of individual points here, each doing their own thing with no relationship. And as long as these are being collided with, I guess you don't get, yeah, maybe that does make sense. They are being collided with by an object that is at an angle. So even though these individual points are getting moved, you know, it's colliding with something moving straight through, it's being pinged by something moving at, say, like a 45-degree angle, which means it pings off of it at an angle. I wasn't counting on that, so that's my fault for not thinking of it. But the hope, well, actually, some of the stuff that's working better here is I thought that these edges would start deforming, and they're not. And then this system, the soft bodies, are way better in a lot of ways because we can do things like drain the energy out from them. So these springs have the energy, but can we make a friction, and does that work? So if I say friction, I'm going to go overboard, like 1,000, and just see if that actually creates friction. Yeah, do you see how now they're losing energy? So, whoa, and it exploded. That's fine. Let's go a little easier on that. But yeah, that drains the energy out. It's actually working better. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better. And they're mostly moving forward, but you see we're still getting these aren't a perfect grid anymore, which breaks the concept because just to follow through on what the base concept was going to be was we could then make a null. Inside that null, put a cylinder. And then on that, make a, I don't know if they usually have like a little flat, almost screwdriver-like head. So maybe like an oil tank. And shrink that down. So essentially making a shape sort of like that. And if that all goes into the null, that could then go into a cloner. That cloner will be set to object. Said object will be the plane. And then I want to copy onto the polygon center of every single one of them. These can be multi-instances, which would make it go pretty quick. Transform it. I'm not sure the rotation, so I'm just going to guess. 90. Nope. 90. Yep. And they're way too big. And yeah, make them nice and small. So now we kind of get the pin impression, and they're all cloning onto that plane, which is what the face is colliding with, was what the aim of the concept was going to be. So now when we hit play, I don't expect it to work great, but you see those are getting pushed out. But yeah, it's taking on all these crazy angles. Actually, that's not the hardest. The angles aren't the hardest thing to fix, because all we have to do is say, hey, cloner, don't worry about aligning the clone. And you see they will all continue to be forward. And if we hide the face, and actually we also hide the plane, we just want to see the pins. And the pins would actually have to be extra long. I kind of forgot about that. But yeah, the pins need to be really long. So let's make those 100. And then we make the pin head move up on Z, nope, Y, so they're there on the tip. And then there would be another, let's just make a box. So I'm going to make the box really big and really skinny. So the pins could all happily live there. So you see they're all kind of like stuck in that box. And that's the way pin impression looks. It's like behind it, they're all sticking out the back. So that that's happening. It just looks nice and clean. And then we hit play. And then as the face pushes forward, all these pins are moving forward based on the shape. So we are able to account for everything except that they're slightly moving off at angles, which is breaking the pattern. And like I said, all of this was an attempt to do this without making a depth map. So we definitely ran into some limitations of what a non-depth map version could do. But yeah, you can definitely see the basic idea working there. I wonder if did we overcomplicate this a bunch? I wonder if we overcomplicated this a bunch. Because here's a new idea. It might explode, but it might not. Yeah, I was about to wrap up, but here, we're gonna kind of start over. I'll keep that. We don't need that. We need the face, we don't need the plane. And I'll just make a new nail. Yeah. Okay, so let us use a connector type that we almost never get to use, which is kind of exciting. I'm going to begin with a sphere. And how's the best way of doing this? I want a sphere collider, but it's going to be stretched out. I guess we can make it editable. It's fine. Actually, yeah, it doesn't have to be a sphere. I'm being silly. Let's make it a cube. And I'm in no way making this real world scale. Let's just make it kind of based off the head. So let's kind of imagine this is sort of one pin, okay? Rewind. Okay, so this is one pin, shrink, and make it longer. Okay, cool. That is going to become a dynamic object. So let's right click and say simulation rigid body. Yes. And that's going to be the collider. Now, I actually don't want to see that render. It's a collider body, or yeah, it's a rigid body. The shape is going to be a sphere. A sphere is the best shape to collide with. So I'm going to say it is a ellipsoid, which is a stretched out sphere. And that's that shape. That's completely fine. And then if we hit play right now, nothing's going to happen, but then the head's going to collide with it and it's going to go flying away and it'll just keep drifting through space. That's fine. But if we have this in the wrong spot, and let me demonstrate, if we put this in the spot where, say, it's hitting this nose, and obviously the nose is at like more of an angle, and it needs to be more forward. If it hits at this angle, we should see this kind of spin. See, it's going to like twist it off to the side, and that's what we don't want. We don't want it spinning off to the side. But there are different types of constraints. So we can say, hey, simulate dynamics connector. So this connector, I don't want to make it a child, so I will put it into a null, the pin into a null, and put the connector in that same null. And zero it out, so reset transform. The hinge type will be a slider type. And this is saying you are only allowed to move forward and backward. The object it will be connecting with is just the cube and then nothing. So now, let's see what that does. Possibly nothing. Oh, look at that, look at that. It didn't twist. It is exactly in the same spot and it's only allowed to move forward and backward. So exactly what we want. Now, there is potentially other things that this has the capability of doing, but I don't think we need to worry. Like, you can't put limits on it. Like, it can only move so far forward. You might want that type of thing. I'm just going to ignore that part for now because I don't think it's important. That is the dynamic object. So let's actually make the pin. So like I said, they always need to be longer than you think they will. So I'm going to make it like extra long and zero it out inside of the null. And then it's a good idea to pivot it so it's kind of like right at the beginning. I'm not eyeballing it, so it's, you know, should be right about where that null is. So now that that's happened, I would like to make a cylinder again to make a nice looking pin. Make it a child of the null for now. Reset transform. Aim it the correct orientation. We don't need any height segments. I'm going to go easy on the rotation segments. Honestly, we don't need a cap. I'm just getting rid of all the information we don't need. We need a small radius. And it needs to, actually I'm going to zero it out on that one so we can get the same length. Yep. I'm, again, eyeballing, so there we go. Now we actually have the cylinder we want to see. This dynamic object is saying apply to children. I'm going to say no, don't worry about applying to children. All it's looking at is the cube. That's the only thing it cares about. And then just keeping it simple, I'll make a duplicate of the cylinder. We'll make it smaller, T for scale, make that radius bigger, smaller, nice. Move that up to be the head of the pin. That one we will give caps, and we will give a few more rotation segments, why not? Okay, so keeping it simple. So, and if you want to be particular, we say head. This one will be the pin collider. Now, in this particular rig, like the pin collider's inside of it, so we don't need to hide it, but we could visually hide it and then tell these to show up. I don't like doing that. I don't like using the green stoplight because it can, sometimes you want to like turn off an entire rig, and if you have green ones, they're going to still be there. But anyway, here is the best part, is these types of rigs with these connectors can be put into cloners, which is nuts. Let's make this smaller just so it's not eating up all that visual area. Let's give it a save before we clone a bunch of them. 3A pin precision. Cool. Okay, now cloner, pin in cloner, grid, yes. X, Y, no Z, only one. And now we can make as many of these as we want. The distance between them should be small. Let's say 25 by 25 by 25. Okay, even smaller, I think, 15, 15, 15. Yeah, that's pretty good. And we just make as many of them as we want. Ring. Now these are dynamic, so we can't, you know, we could get some slowdown here, but let's move them into a semi-appropriate position. Couple more. Okay. The head is already set up as a collider. These are all doing their thing. We can just make another box. T for scale. Shrink it way down. Move it way up. And because this isn't dynamic, like it's just going to pass right through it. So just eyeballing something for that to pass through, just like a regular pin impression. And save and hit play. Let's see what happens. So wait, is it colliding? No, nothing's colliding yet. So now the head starts sliding forward and the pins get pushed forward too. Now, oh yeah, so there's going to be one missing element. Yeah, those are going to go forward. Let's give ourselves more frames because I want to show you what the problem is. So now when the face stops, I don't think these are going to stop. You see, they're just going to keep on moving. There's nothing to tell them to stop. Now, we could limit them to say that they should naturally have a limit of how far they could go, which could be a good idea. But mostly we could just be like, well, just don't push the head too far into it and it's fine. And all we need to do is give this a bunch of like friction of some sort. So under forces, we can say, don't follow position, but we can drain the energy out. And that can be pretty much as high as we want. That can be like 99% of draining the energy out because the head is forcing it forward and then none of the energy wants to continue. And along those lines, it's probably a good idea to give this 0 bounce. And honestly, even friction doesn't mean anything in this context. So just eliminating variables is fine. I don't care about self-collisions. So that should be pretty much making it as quick as I can calculate. And push those all forward. And then hopefully when the face stops, those stop as well. Yeah, because of the friction, drain the energy out. So pretty much exactly as far as the face pushed it is how far those should have gotten pushed out. Now, this is all about resolution at this point. I am moving the face quite a bit into the overall shape, and we're running at, what were we running at? Maybe about 15 frames a second? No, we're, 12, 13 frames per second. A lot of this is going to have to do with your resolution. So saving this nice simple one. And again, you get access on Patreon to these files. But the main thing is going to be resolution. So if I were to grab the entire cloner, hit T for scale, and start scaling these down, then we're increasing the resolution. If I pull these forward now, you see now we have much smaller pins. So if I keep making them smaller and smaller, we've now increased the resolution of what it will give us back. But of course, now we need to make a lot more of them, and we're already starting to run a bit slow. But just to show you, like if we made that way taller, and let's just do like a sliver of the face. So not as many wide, but more tall. And they're not quite as long. Oh, they're definitely not as long. Scaling them down that way. Yeah, it might have been better to physically shrink the pin. That would have been better. Yeah, I'll do that. Undo, 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 undo. There we go. Okay, so what I should have done is just say, okay, pin, smaller, smaller, cylinder, smaller, the head of the pin, smaller, and now you see, everything's way smaller, and those are smaller pins, and now I could increase the resolution here by saying, they're only 5 apart from each other. So that's a much better way of doing it because now they're just as long. But again, exact same concept here. We can make as many as we want. We've increased the resolution, which will increase the resolution of the face coming through in order to make this run somewhat reasonably for a stream. Let's have it not be all the ones we need. But now, yeah, look at that resolution we're getting. Like, yeah, way better. Look at the fidelity we're getting on like the mouth. We can even see the lips coming through and whatnot. And it's actually not running terribly, but don't expect this to be all super fast. I wonder if we could drop the steps per frame down. It's a little dangerous, but let's see what happens. That should make it run even quicker, which is still not super quick, but it's still running okay. So let's risk it. I shall add a few more height ones, and let's add in way more width ones. Now, because these are dynamic objects, I am 99% sure we cannot turn on multi-instance. Yeah, I'm so sure I'm not even gonna click it. But yeah, this will not be speedy, but let's let that chug along a little bit. Ooh, yeah, we're at half a frame a second. No, we're at a full 3 frames a second. Honestly, better than I was expecting. But yeah, if you bake this down, like it would be, super quick. But yeah, the cool thing about the setup we just did here is we can just throw any model back there we want and not worry about like exporting a movie and like pre-building everything again and again. Like as long as you've got the geometry to collide with, like that should just automatically create the shape as it is. We just built it for real, essentially. Like this is actually the way it really works. There's not really any faking going on here. So yeah, I'm going to say that wraps it up. We only went a little over today. Are there any specific follow-ups to this? Use a protect tag. I don't think a protection tag works on dynamics. A protection tag is mostly designed for like character animation, so that it's like, oh, like this part of the body should only move forward and backward. So now the animator can't accidentally move it in a direction it shouldn't be. So yeah, that's not for dynamics. It could work. I'd be surprised if it did. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Yeah, I think people were, somebody was saying that I had to make stuff editable earlier, which you were correct. Plane going in and out. How about using just fields from a plane effector? Alan, using fields on a plane effector, the problem with that is if you use the plane effector to deform the points, like imagine the original setup we had when it was just a plane, when we just had a plane there, and then you say, okay, here's a plane effector, it's going to deform it and just push the points forward. It's like, okay, that makes perfect sense. But the face that we're feeding in wouldn't be giving like relative information. The face is either I'm inside or out. So it's like 0 or 100%. So the face, it would suddenly pop into like the final form, but not give you that nice smooth transition where like the nose happens first and the eyes come in last because they're recessed. So you would lose all of that information for the transition between the two. It'd be if you did certain tricks, you could kind of fake it, but you wouldn't get the face revealing itself in the way that would realistically. But yeah, that's not a bad idea. Thank you for the kind words. Cheers from Chicago back to Greece. Yes, Tobias again, thank you. If you're not already on the Rocket Lasso Slack channel, it's one of the best ways to get notified. One of the best ways to get notified that the live stream is starting, and there's all sorts of other announcements. I usually, the Slack channel. Oh, here's an extra bonus secret, I guess. The Slack channel is where I usually announce a product launch the night before, and I usually do it on the Slack channel because you never know if you messed something up. Maybe a file didn't get uploaded or something. So I don't want to go and put it on all the social media. So the night before we launch a new product, I tell the Slack channel about it, and I say, shh, don't post it anywhere, but here, if you want to go and get the tool a night early, you can. So that's another little bonus for being there. If you are supporting on Patreon, then you get access to scene files, and you get all sorts of discounts on all the plugins. You get early access to the recorded videos before they get posted everywhere. And I got to figure out the schedule because there's bonus streams that happen. I don't think it's going to be different. For a while last year, we were doing bonus streams on Tuesday and Thursday, and it eats up a lot of time, and the editing and everything. It just eats up so much of my time. I don't know if I can maintain that all the time, but there will be probably regularly at least one bonus stream where we dive extra deep on something. And usually for me, it's like, let's say we tackled like that bacon. I was going to say the bacon generator, but when we were trying to make that organic chemistry kind of growth thing go up and then fall over, there is going to be a good way of doing that, but it's going to take like hours of research. And that's the type of thing I might do in a live stream of like getting really meticulous, where this is more about like, I want to tackle a couple questions and interact more directly with the audience and kind of plow through things. So that's what the bonus stream often is. And then the other half of it is like, I've got an idea for a tutorial and I'm like exploring the possibilities for a tutorial. And sometimes even in the stream, I will record the raw tutorial and then, edit it out as I go. So yeah, and Dean, you are correct. The Spline utility will be coming out soon. I'd love to have it out before NAB, but there's a lot happening before NAB. So, fingers crossed, but I'm definitely not guaranteeing it, especially since I wanted to launch this back in like October. But yeah, thank you so much everybody for coming and hanging out. It is super fun to do this. I'm glad that we're back. Thank you for the links. We could not do it without the links. Here's a link to Patreon if anybody wants to join there and get access to the scene files as we go. Well, I guess it's not as we go, but I'll usually post it, tomorrow or Friday. But that'll wrap it up. There'll be another stream a week from today, same time. At the beginning, we aim for 2 hours. It often goes over. I definitely always try and complete a question. But yeah, super fun. Thanks, everybody. It's a good way to start season 4. Very good questions. Great seeing so many new people. So make sure if you're on Twitch, you can sign up for free on Twitch and then just click to follow. It's like, it doesn't cost anything. But if you follow on Twitch, then you get an automatic email every time I go live. And then you should definitely follow on YouTube because the stream will pop up in your YouTube feed when the stream begins as well. But besides that, thank you so much, everybody. And I'll see you in a week. So that'll be a bye-bye.